Hello, let's talk about sprint planning. Oh, by the way, if you're not using Scrum, what I'm going to discuss today also applies to you. It basically applies to any short-term planning. Anything between a day and the absolutely maximum of a month. In Scrum, normally we're talking about 2 weeks. That's the average sprint length. But everything we're going to discuss here applies to short-term planning, not necessarily Scrum. Before you actually do the planning, you have to ensure that all the items that you're going to plan to execute during a sprint are in what we call a ready state. That is done via backlog refinement, which we previously discussed. So make sure all the items are in a ready state, meaning you talked about it, you found out everything you need to find out about them, and more important, you split them so they're as small as possible. Remember, smaller items flow through the system a lot faster. The next step in planning is to know your velocity. Velocity is just how much work, on average, your team is able to execute during a sprint, during a period of time. This is regardless of you using story points or not. Most of my teams I coach to just during sprint refinement split the items as small as possible so that they have about the same size, and then you just count them. Whether you use story points or you just count items, what you need to know is what is your average velocity, how much work a team on average gets done during a sprint. Let's talk about the next step, capacity. You have your items in the ready, you know your average velocity. The next thing is, what's my capacity for the following sprint, for the following amount of time? How many things can I get done in that period of time, in that sprint? You can also refer to historical data for that. For instance, you know your average velocity. You know that when the whole team is in there are no holidays, there are no vacations, you know how many items you can get done or how many story points you can get done. You can also easily go back in historical data and say, last time somebody went on vacation, instead of creating 10 items during the sprint, we did 8. And you can calculate based on that. Now, if a team is new, you don't know the velocity, you don't know the historical data, so you're going to have to guess. And it's normally going to take between 3 to 5 sprints to have a pretty good idea what the average velocity is and how that influences the capacity. When it comes to planning capacity, to understand capacity, do not overcomplicate. Historical data will give you all you need. Don't try to come with complicated spreadsheets and Excel calculations and etc. to try to figure out if you have half an hour here and there. That is totally counterproductive and it's just going to stress everybody out. Historical data, it's all you need. Now, a very important thing to keep in mind is the need to have what we call an interrupt buffer. And that can be also calculated by historical data. It's very common for the team to be interrupted by, let's say, a production issue that the team has to go address, has to help troubleshoot, or something else. And again, we can calculate via historical data how many story points or how many items we did not complete every time we get interrupted. Normally, the interrupt buffer can be somewhere around 20 to 30% of your capacity, but that varies from team to team. Again, use historical data to understand when there are interruptions, things that the team did not plan, how did that affect your velocity? Whether you use story points, whether you count items, same concept. You know the penalty, sort of speaking, that the team suffered from that interruption and plan accordingly. Another thing to watch for during sprint planning is when you see teams opening items and discussing them again. When that happens, in most cases, is a sign that your backlog refinement was not properly done. So, summarizing, you have items in the ready, You know your average velocity, be it in points or number of items. You have a pretty good idea of your capacity. Then you just bring enough work into the sprint to fill to capacity, but not completely. Remember, you have to have that interrupt buffer because lots of things happen beyond your control. And that's pretty much it. I hope you like this, and I'll see you next time. Thank you very much.